If the New Orleans Saints decide that they want to move on from Derek Carr in 2025, pursuing a trade might be the best way to get it done. We got all of that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? I am your host, your friend Ross Jackson, New Orleans native, your New Orleans Saints expert and credentialed member of the media covering those New Orleans Saints as the Saints beat writer over at LouisianaSports.net and Saints analyst with WWL TV. And on today's episode of Locked On Saints, I wanted to ask some tough questions about the New Orleans Saints offense. Are Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed truly enough at wide receiver? I'll tell you why they're not and what's needed. We'll take a look at running back as well. As Alvin Kamara going to be able to carry this running back room again in 2025? I'll tell you what the New Orleans Saints need to get done next to Alvin in order to find success next year in the run game. And we're going to kick everything off with a bit of a different approach to the common Derek Carr question. Should the New Orleans Saints move on from Derek Carr? Instead, we'll ask the question, what's the best way for New Orleans to move on from Derek Carr? And I'm going to explain why trying to pursue a trade partner might be complicated, but would be the best option for both New Orleans and Derek Carr in terms of their future together. We got that coming up for you on today's episode. We appreciate you, whether it's your first time or your next time, for making us your first listen and for being it every day or here on the show, which is the proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode, as well as all of our crossover Thursday episodes still ongoing with the playoffs and division round underway, are brought to you by our friends over at Prize Picks. Go and check them out today. Download the Prize Picks app and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL. You'll get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. The best way for the New Orleans Saints to move on from Derek Carr and for Derek Carr to move on from the New Orleans Saints would be by agreeing upon and pursuing a trade. That would be the easiest way for these two to kind of break ties, as long as, of course, that trade gets done before the third day of the 2025 league year, which is when that $30 million salary cap base salary becomes guaranteed. If the Saints were to allow that to guarantee in, then they're kind of, stuck in 2025, which might not be the worst situation for New Orleans. But remember, the question we're asking here is what's the best way for the team to move on from Derek Carr if the two decide to move towards a split? And I do think that a split makes sense for both sides. I don't think Derek Carr, who's going into his age 34, age 35 year, is going to be in a situation where he's looking to rebuild, especially knowing that there's no future for Derek Carr here in New Orleans beyond 2025. And for the New Orleans Saints, depending upon the head coach that comes in, the head coach might want a different quarterback or might want to get started with a different quarterback or might want to start working with the young quarterbacks on the roster instead of the veteran quarterback. We'll see. Now, having a veteran quarterback is a very comfortable way to go. Going into 2025 as a new head coach with Derek Carr is also a very comfortable way to go because that's not your quarterback. That's their quarterback, right? So you get the opportunity at the end of 2025 saying, whoa, I never had my quarterback. I had your quarterback. This is what Dennis Allen was able to do after kind of a year of Jameis Winston and then the expeditious retreat to Andy Dalton, which effectively could have been said, no, you did have your quarterback, but I digress. That's not the way that the Saints played it. So, look, pursuing a trade is not an easy situation for New Orleans. You'd have to find a trade partner, which actually isn't that entirely complicated. It's just, are people willing to take on the contract and things like that? Are they willing to deal with the financials and all that stuff? Derek Carr's contract as a quarterback is not that overblown at all. But if you look at the teams that are in need of quarterbacks, you got Tennessee and Cleveland. They're both right at the top of the draft, number 1 and number 2. So you can probably take them off the list. The New York Giants, there's always the chance for the reunion with the Las Vegas Raiders, but I think we'll take that one out. But you got the New York Giants and New England Patriots, who really have their guy, so is going for a $50 million guy behind your rookie quarterback. Does that make sense? Probably not. So you can take them off the list. The Indianapolis Colts, same question. I guess it would depend upon how comfortable they really feel with Anthony Richardson, but because their top quarterback is on a rookie contract, they could afford to slip in a veteran contract. So that could be a way to go. And then the New York Jets, who probably are the most enticing or most logical in terms of a team that's going to be looking to get away from its current quarterback situation and maybe look for a veteran quarterback. Owner Woody Johnson likes the veteran quarterback approach and everything, maybe a little bit too much. And so you can see exactly where the Saints could potentially talk a team like the New York Giants, who were in on Derek Carr before the Saints signed Derek Carr. That was kind of the competition for DC at that time. And then, of course, the Jets decided to go with Aaron Rodgers, and I think would have been much better off with Derek Carr, but an opportunity to right that wrong. Then you just need Derek Carr, who has a no trade clause, to agree to that trade in the first place. So that's the thing that you've got to watch out for. But the fact of the matter is that you're not trading him because you're tired of him or you want to get rid of him or you think he's done a bad job. You're trading him because, hey, dude, like, this is a rebuild situation for the next 3 or 4 years. You got a year left here. You really want to spend it here, or do you want to go somewhere where you have the opportunity to potentially re-sign another contract, get your final deal of your career, and then be able to continue to move on with a team from there? There's just no future for Derek Carr in New Orleans beyond 2025 as a stopgap quarterback. And I don't know if that's something that Derek Carr really wants to spend his time doing. So that would help them move some of the money around. That would help in terms of getting, some things offloaded and all this other stuff. But for the most part, the toughest part is finding the trade destination and him waiving his trade clause. But I don't think those things are impossible at all, especially if the Saints are adamant enough that they don't want to let that $30 million contract set in, that they don't want to deliver and restructure anything like that. If you can't get a trade done, right? Again, our question is, how should the Saints move on from Derek Carr should they choose to? If you can't get, or what should they do with Derek Carr rather, if you can't get that trade done, then the other option is to restructure him, but you don't have to restructure every bit of the contract. You can do a partial restructure. You can do enough to save yourself some money here in 2025 without absolutely demolishing yourself in 2026, which really, even if they did a full restructure, they'd be okay in 2026, if we're being honest. But they could just restructure a part of his base salary, not his whole base salary. But the tricky part is that another $10 million for 2026 becomes guaranteed the 5th day of the league year for this year here for New Orleans. So that kind of ends up costing you $10 million in 2026. Now, you can deal with that and part ways in 2026, but you want to create as clean a break in 2026 as possible. So if he's on that roster in 2025, no matter what, there's $10 million in 2026 that becomes guaranteed to him. But if you don't restructure the entire $30 million and then give him the big signing bonus, or a large portion of the $30 million, give him the signing bonus, all those other things, then it'll at least diminish a little bit of what accelerates going into 2026 if you do decide to try to make as clean a break as possible then. So I do think that that's an important detail as well. Carr is simply, he doesn't have a long-term future here in New Orleans. There's no need to continue to restructure him. There's no need to continue to extend him either, unless that's what the new head coach, whoever that ends up being, wants to do. But I can't imagine that a new head coach coming in and the likelihood of the Saints hiring a first-time head coach, I can't imagine that they want to saddle themselves up with a end-of-year quarterback or end-of-career quarterback, right? I'm not trying to say that he's only got a couple years left here, but he's probably only got maybe 5 years max left. And so do you really want to saddle yourself up with an end-of-career quarterback? Or do you want the young quarterbacks that are going to be coming in through these draft classes and things like that? It's pretty clear which direction a new head coach would want to go. So trade first. If not a trade, you look at how you can restructure a part of his contract, not the entire, not do a full restructure. And then outside of that, just getting ready for that 2026 clean break, which no matter what is going to cost you some money in 2026, but you can lessen a little bit of that hit by not fully restructuring his contract here in 2025. So those are my thoughts on what to do with Derek Carr should the team be heading towards a split. Coming up next, the question is Alvin Kamara enough at running back for the New Orleans Saints? I'm going to tell you why he's not and who they should go out and pursue. We got that coming up next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. From the opening drive to the final whistle, you are going to be able to make the most out of the NFL playoffs and make it even more exciting with FanDuel, especially right now because new customers can bet $5 and you're going to get $300 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. That's $300 to keep all of the action going. For instance, this weekend, you've got some really, really nice ones. Remember, you want that $5 bet to win. So you want to bet that on a favorite. You've got the Kansas City Chiefs, who are 8.5-point favorites over the Houston Texans. You have the Detroit Lions as well, 9.5-point favorites over the Washington Commanders. Easy ones to get in on with your first $5 bet. So you have that chance to walk away with $300 in bonus bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's FanDuel.com. Make this NFL playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, family, the New Orleans Saints should feel very comfortable moving ahead with Alvin Kamara after he had one of his best seasons of his career in 2025, but he's not going to be enough at running back to make you feel good about that running back room. He's going to need some help. That's where I think the New Orleans Saints are headed when it comes to their running back room. Look, he had a re-breakout season in 2025, right? I mean, Alvin Kamara broke out a long time ago, but then he's had a couple of tough years in the system that didn't really use him appropriately and all those other things. Finally, a system that did use him appropriately, got him back to getting out in space, running outside the tackles, all those other things. He had a career high in rushing yards, despite the fact that he missed the last few games, right? Last game that he played was that game against the Washington Commanders where he tweaked the groin on the outstanding touchdown catch, the one-hand stretch catch that he made that was thrown by Cedric Wilson Jr., of course. And that was the last time that we saw him throughout the season, but still 950 rushing yards, a career high for Alvin Kamara. And he was on the verge of his first 1,000-yard rushing season. In fact, had been in striking distance for a couple of games, but never really got there as the offensive line continued to struggle in the run game, all those other bits. He also had his fourth highest receiving yards total with 543. So even though he was running the ball like crazy, still caught over 60 passes and still ended up in a situation to where he was within his top 5 seasons of receiving yards. He had 8 total touchdowns on the year. However, 5 of those touchdowns came in the first 2 weeks. Remember, he scored 4 touchdowns in one game up against the Dallas Cowboys. That was 50% of his scoring for the rest of the season was done in that one game, more than 50% done in the first 2 games, and hadn't scored a touchdown up until that Washington game from well early on in the season. So you saw the scoring potential that should have been there for him. Maybe there's a little bit of the Taysom Hill vulture campaign that's going on there, but outside of that, just didn't have the scoring potential in terms of what you're used to seeing from Alvin Kamara, and that came down to a lot of the usage in the red zone, stuff like that. Not just Alvin Kamara himself, but the team's decisions in certain situations. And that's one of the reasons why I think that New Orleans needs a second running back that they can lean on. Remember, the Saints' run game was at its best when it was not only Alvin Kamara, but it was also Taysom Hill. And you had 2 guys that were able to take over the game on the ground. And if you look at a lot of the NFL playoff teams right now, the Bills, James Cook and Ty Johnson, the Lions, Jahmyr Gibbs and James Montgomery, the Ravens, Derrick Henry, Justice Hill, the Commanders, Brian Robinson, as well as Austin Eckler, who's like okay, but also you have a fantastic runner in Jaden Daniels. So you have multiple run threats, right? The Ravens also had Lamar Jackson. The Bills also have Josh Allen. The Lions, never mind. But you get the idea there, right? In terms of like there's kind of this trifecta of places where you can get this run game going because of what you have at the quarterback position. Plus, you've got 2 options at each running back spot. You look at the Packers, they had it as well. The Chiefs, if it wasn't for injury, they would also have it with Isaiah Pacheco and others. But you get the idea here. There's always multiple run threats. And remember, that's where the Saints were at their best as well. You look back at the Super Bowl year where they had guys like Pierre Thomas and Reggie Bush and Mike Bell. You look at the playoff runs where they had Alvin Kamara and Mark Ingram, or Alvin Kamara and Latavius Murray. That's where the run games were at their best, is when you had sort of those complementary pieces, not complementary pieces, but complementary pieces that existed outside of the kind of one back system. And the Saints, for all intents and purposes, because of whether it be injuries at the position or whether it just be a lack of effectiveness at the position, they have had one back that they can lean on and that is Alvin Kamara. And then they've had Taysom Hill. I'm not so certain what Taysom Hill's future is, right? So for New Orleans, they have to go out and find another running back that will be available and that will be able to complement and that will be able to operate alongside Alvin Kamara. Couple names to watch out for. Obviously, Ashton Jeanty out of Boise State is a big one, especially at number 9. The Saints are in perfect position to draft him. The round 1 running back is back. Sorry to say it to everybody that doesn't believe it, but it's just the truth, seeing the effectiveness of a Bijan Robinson, who, by the way, the Falcons have not only Bijan Robinson, but who? Tyler Algier, right? So again, multiple running backs. But you also have seen the effectiveness of Jahmyr Gibbs. You've seen how much success the Bills have had by investing in their running back position. I know James Cook was not a first-round running back, but I promise you, any success of any running back makes the first-round running back viable again. Derrick Henry, right? So like you're seeing all of the success that teams are having with their run game because of their reinvestment at the running back position. Running back contracts are about to come up, and draftable running backs at higher positions in the draft are about to come up. It's the ebbs and flows of the NFL. We see it with safety all the time. We see it with running back all the time. And now the backswing is now in favor of the running back position at the moment. And so the Saints can take advantage of that in a ridiculously good running back class. And that's the good news, that the Saints don't have to go with Ashton Jeanty if they want a running back that can contribute at the NFL level. They can if they want an absolute game breaker, but they could also go with Cam Skattebo out of Arizona State in the 2nd or 3rd round. They can go with Dylan Sampson out of Tennessee, one of my favorite running backs in this class with all that versatility, in the 2nd or 3rd rounds. They can go with a DJ Giddens in day 3 out of Kansas State. There's a lot, RJ Harvey, like there's a lot of these really, really solid running backs out there that you can add to your roster and find guys that will be able to immediately contribute to your team rounds 1, 2, 3 through 7. It does not matter. You will be able to find somebody, maybe not the 7th round, but day 3, right? Day 3, you'll certainly be able to find somebody. The unfortunate thing is that both of the Penn State running backs, who I really, really like, including Singleton there, have announced that they're going back to Penn State. I think that's a wise choice for both of them. I expect that Ohio State running back Quinshon Judkins will also go back, but we won't know that. Wednesday was a deadline for every team for every player that played for every team in college football, except for the Ohio State Buckeyes and the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, who will play Monday for the national championship, to declare for the draft. So this is a way that the Saints can go. And I'll tell you one other thing that I think the Saints could potentially invest in if they really wanted to. And this goes against probably a lot of people's, like a way that a lot of people feel about, sentimentality around players and stuff like that. I get it. But just hear me out. That the Saints could pursue another Taysom Hill. You don't have to pursue one in the 1st round like a Tyler Warren, the Penn State tight end, but you could try to make it work with Joe Milton if you want to, not at quarterback, but as this sort of ace in the hole that you can use in a bunch of different places and everything like that. So there are still those players that are available to where you can also help yourself quite a bit. And on top of all that, or do roll the dice on Joe Milton, depending upon where you're able to roll the dice on him. I don't think that's at 9, but do roll the dice on him and add a running threat at quarterback as well. Then you have your kind of, I want to be very careful about how I say this because it's not the same, but you have your Washington style approach of 2 running backs and a running quarterback. You have your Buffalo Bills style approach, especially if Joe Brady becomes your quarterback, your head coach and your offensive play caller. He's accustomed to having multiple running backs, including a 3rd down guy like Ty Johnson, but also having a running back, not a running back, but a quarterback that can run. You have your Ravens-like approach, your Houston-like approach, to where you don't necessarily have a quarterback that's going to be a runner for you all the time in CJ Stroud, but somebody that can go out there and do a little more. I wouldn't blame the Saints for kind of going down that road. So they can figure that out, whether that's and look, it doesn't have to be Joe Milton, right? It could be any mobile quarterback later on, if that's the route that you plan to go with that quarterback. But if you're looking for a stand and deliver full-time passer, you're probably not going to find that in this year's draft outside of the top 2 guys. So, and the jury's out on if you're going to find that with the top 2 guys. But I do think the bottom line is that Alvin Kamara is not enough at running back, not because Alvin Kamara lacks, but because you need more in today's NFL. And so the Saints should be looking to invest back in that position this offseason, especially in a historically good running back draft class. And hey, if you can find some extra help at quarterback and other positions, I think you find that for your run game as well. Coming up next, are Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed enough at wide receiver? That is a blatant no for me. And I'm going to tell you exactly what the New Orleans Saints need next. We got that coming up for you as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by our friends over at Rocket Money. Rocket Money is absolutely awesome. I've been using it for the past couple of months, helping me find subscriptions that I'd completely forgotten about and that I was paying for like every month, as well as some annual subscriptions as well. They were huge in terms of helping me out there, and they made it so easy to track them all down. It's just like kind of having like a personal assistant helping you out with your finances, right? Like that's the way that it works out. And it goes beyond that too, right? Not just finding your favorite subscriptions, but also helping you identify financial goals and achieve them as well. They have a goals feature that I really love. I've been able to kind of let them automatically set aside money for my future without me having to worry about doing all the monthly budgeting and all that other stuff. It really is like having your own like financial advisor in your pocket. I mean, it's awesome. I love Rocket Money. So cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money today. I love it. You will too. Go to rocketmoney.com/locked-on to get started today. That's rocketmoney.com/locked-on, rocketmoney.com/locked-on. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. Our final question of the day: are Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed enough at the wide receiver spot and for the wide receiver room? My answer there is no. And again, doesn't have to do with the fact that it's not about Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed lacking in talent at all. I've told you time and time again, respect Rashid Shaheed's gangster, right? And I would say the same thing about Chris Olave, who has every bit of the potential still to continue to develop into one of the NFL's best wideouts. But I do think that you need somebody to take the pressure off of him. I don't think that Chris Olave and his build and all these other pieces is going to be able to be an X receiver for you primarily, right? And I think that's what the New Orleans Saints need. They lack that big body that can help in the run game and be a blocker on the outside, be sort of this weak side, split end over on the outside, be the guy on the island that can take off a little bit of pressure from guys like Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed. I think having Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed is awesome, but I also think that adding a 6'2" plus, 210 pound plus type wide receiver, 205 pound plus wide receiver on the outside that can maybe move inside every now and then so you can still get those guys out on the perimeter. I do think there's value in having that speed on the perimeter, but finding the bulk and the physicality to complement the speed that Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed brings and the blend of speed and physicality that Chris Olave brings, I think is a really good way to go. And there's a few ways that the Saints can do it. It's not hard to succeed in this path. Via free agency might be a little bit tough, but look, T. Higgins, 6'3", 216 pounds, 6'3" when he came into the NFL, might actually be a little bit taller now, but he's going to be a free agent. Do the Bengals keep him? They've decided to start spending money. For the most part, the money that they're spending is on the offensive side, so there's a chance that that works out and that T. Higgins doesn't hit the market. And there's also a greater chance that T. Higgins heads elsewhere and that the Saints don't have the money to sign him. So don't worry, I'm not just living in a pipe dream here. Let me tell you the others. Tetairoa McMillian, Arizona wide receiver, 6'5", 212 pounds. Excellent build, excellent frame. He's not the fastest guy in the world, but neither was Michael Thomas. It's not what you're looking for. You're not looking for speed. You're looking for a guy that's going to be able to go out there and dominate. And that's what a guy like Tetairoa McMillian can do. How about Savion Williams? We spoke about him in our mock draft Monday. We did a quick mock draft Monday, 4 rounds the other day, where we started with Tyler Warren. And in the second round, we came right back around to Savion Williams out of TCU. 6'4", 225 pounds. The guy takes snaps at running back as well. So like I said, you can go and find those versatile pieces who can also help you in your run game. But I think at the NFL, this dude, 6'5", 225 pounds, probably going to run in the 4.4 range. Has a little bit of a drop concern, but I think you can fix that at the NFL. And then you end up getting to a place here to where you're able to build with a big-bodied wide receiver on the outside and have him with some speed complementing your other speed guys that also bring some physicality. It's a good blend, right? We're looking for compliments here. We're not looking for somebody to take over a role. We're not looking for somebody to come into New Orleans and, kick anybody off to the side. You're looking for somebody that's going to be able to operate with Chris Olave, operate with Rashid Shaheed. That's what you're looking for. I think Tetairoa McMillian is like the perfect mold. He just might be out of range for New Orleans with the two quarterback needy teams being the ones to draft at the top. Tetairoa McMillan is going to be a guy that's going to go early. So you'd have to probably move up for him if you want him. But if you don't move up for him, there's other options. So like we mentioned, Savion Williams. How about Jaden Higgins, a guy that we've mocked in the third, fourth rounds a couple of times, probably more of a third round guy. And his stock is going to continue to go up out of Iowa State. 6'4", 215 pounds. Again, checks that box of 6'2" or more, 205 or more. Just be that big physical presence. And that's exactly what Jaden Higgins did during his time over at Iowa State. Gave them a contested catch receiver. Was a good red zone option for them as well. Is somebody that can operate in the short intermediate areas, but that can also challenge a little bit deep. I think you're looking for maybe that short intermediate. Can you run a slant? Can you run a dig? Can you run an out? Can you run a hitch? Can you come back towards the quarterback? And can you give the quarterback a tight end on the outside that runs routes like a wide receiver and catches passes like a wide receiver? If you can find that guy, it's a fantastic piece to add to the equation here. Jaden Higgins, really solid route runner as well. And then how about a guy that I haven't talked about much really at all, but that I really, really like that he's an interesting one because he's probably going to go in the first round, but he's a wide receiver that like no one talks about is Elic Ayomanor out of Stanford. Just one of those guys, 6'2", 210 pounds, contested catch receiver, tough physical guy, solid route runner, really smart player. And I'm not just saying that because he went to Stanford. Okay. But the Saints have drafted from Stanford before. Remember, that's where Paulson Adebo, a former wide receiver turned cornerback, came from. But Elic Ayomanor is one of those guys that is just a big physical technician. And that's what he does. He runs the quick out. He runs the quick slant. He runs the digs. He does the things that you need that big physical box out presence to do at the NFL level. And I think he's going to be able to do it at the NFL level. I think Elic Ayomanor and Savion Williams are both guys that could go in the first round, go in the second round, and that could absolutely be better pros than they were college guys. I'm not trying to make like the Puka Nacua comparison, but if I was going to make the Puka Nacua comparison for anybody, it's probably Elic Ayomanor. The dude is just big, strong, physical, and better than the guys in front of him. And that's something that I think you need mentality-wise on top of all this too, right? Like, it's not just, are you physically bigger and stronger? Remember, Brandon Coleman was bigger than everybody on the field, but he never played like a big guy, right? You see these wide receivers out there all the time that have this big physical looking build, but don't have the big physical mentality. Elic Ayomanor has the big physical mentality. Savion Williams has the mentality of a player that's just better than anybody that he lines up against. Tetairoa McMillian has the mentality of a guy that's bigger and better than anybody that he lines up against. And Jaden Higgins has the mentality of a guy that can get open anywhere, any spot on the field at any time. That's what you want. That's what you want. Those are great mentalities to have at the position, because effectively what you're looking for is what people will colloquially call a wide receiver one. But really what you're looking for is an X receiver. You want a weak side, split end, all by himself, lining up on the opposite side of the heavy side of the formation that goes out there and is just on an island by himself, one-on-one with the corner, probably with the safety over the top, and can get open. And that can get open every single time because he's bigger and more physical. You want that guy who needs 1 yard of separation to be open. You want a Michael Thomas. You want a Michael Thomas. And that's what I think you can get with some of these guys. Now, I think you can get with some of these guys a Michael Thomas type, right? That will come. And I'm not saying you're going to get somebody that's peak Michael Thomas, but a guy like Tetairoa McMillian has that ability. A guy like Elic Ayomanor has that ability. I love this class of wide receivers at the top, right? Within the first 2 days. And so grabbing one of these guys would make so much sense for New Orleans and would be an excellent, excellent way to round out that wide receiver room. And then you can continue to build and add to it. I think bringing back a Marquez Valdez-Scantling makes a ton of sense. You can go and find some of those other veteran wideouts that can build out the bottom of that roster, see what you've got in Bub Means as he continues to develop, Mason Tipton as he continues to develop, so on and so forth. So you want that contested catch threat. You want that short distance reliability, right? It's 3rd and 2. I don't want to just be able to run or take a shot deep. I want to be able to throw a slant to the weak side. If I can do that, great. Dominant force that plays the X. I think you can find that in all those guys. And meanwhile, you let Rashid Shaheed and Chris Olave do all of the expansive things that they do, including taking the top off with their ridiculous speed over the top. So that's the way that I look at it for New Orleans. Are they enough? No. Are they the right start? Yes. And you need that one more compliment. And I think you can easily find that this year. All right, those are my tough questions for the offense. I want to get to tough questions for the defense tomorrow. Let me know what your tough questions are, and we'll go ahead and get those in. But man, I think the biggest thing is, should the New Orleans Saints bring anybody back on their defensive line in 2025? I think that's where we're going to start in tomorrow's episode. We appreciate you very much, as always, for making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen, make sure you go and check out Locked On NFL. If you want more Saints content, make sure you join the Locked On Saints Insider program, especially with the coaching search going on. People finding out now that Aaron Glenn likes the Jets job. I've been telling our insiders that for like 3 weeks. So make sure you join that. You can find the link in the description. You can text who dat 504-285-7473. Free for 14 days, $4.99 a month after that. Buy me a cup of coffee, basically. And you can cancel anytime. So come and check us out over on the Insider program. We appreciate you very much, as always, for making us a part of your day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me on the show. As always, if you see me, please say hi. And if you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know what the family's doing. Let me know how you're living. Let me know how you're momming them. And trust you, that nation. I'll holla at you.